the first impression is one of the most important things when it comes to your co-living space, and not having a person meet you at the door is part of that first impression. And so yeah, when you get in and there's directions on your phone and you got to go there and then you got to go here and you're confused, and that is what someone will remember, is the nervous experience that they had when they got there, instead of someone being like, "Hi, I'm Jacob. I'm going to show you your room. Everything's going to be great. I'm going to answer all your questions," right? You immediately become calm when there's someone who seems like they know what they're doing, right? And so, I'd say remote check-ins is probably the one thing that I would stray away from.
Oh, Jacob, I love that one. Nobody's given that advice yet. Christine here with another fun episode of the Coliving Code Show every single Wednesday. It's on YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, iTunes, and also the CEO of Kindred, which is a platform for the co-living industry. And as usual, I want to give a quick thank you to our sponsors that help support this show, starting with Anyplace. With the ever-growing demand for flexible living, it is more valuable than ever to find move-in ready housing that fits your needs without the burden of a long lease. Service departments and alternative options like co-living make it super easy and painless to move, relocate, or simply explore a city. And we're honored to share with you the best platform to discover unique and affordable places to live in locations around the world. For an operator, definitely reach out to them if you want to get listed on their platform. And also thank you to ISL Furnishings, a brand created through Interspace Living, which exists in the exciting space where design meets function. Interspace parlayed its success in commercial grade unit furniture and conceived an elevated offering. They believe strongly in the co-living industry, and they already work with some of the larger companies like Quarters and Star City. They were founded with the mission to bring your brand to life. Their goal is to revolutionize the unit furniture experience. And driven by creativity, ISL Furnishings believes that interiors should inspire brilliance. Every venue has its own voice. They exist to clarify that voice, interpret your brand vision, and deliver superior quality on time, every time. Last quick thing I wanted to mention is the House Monk is hosting their Monk Realty Summit on September 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. I will actually be one of the speakers too. And we put the website where you can register right in the show notes. You know what? One of the other reasons I started this show was I always had these amazing conversations just one-on-one with operators from around the world and people that are very active in co-living. So I thought it would always be cool to let you guys kind of be a fly on the wall of these conversations. And this is one that is really fun. It's Jacob Shapiro. He's coming back on this show. It's been over 2 years. He actually started working over at Outpost Club 3 years ago. He was first the community manager for Outpost's 2 houses and 21 members in New York City. And now he facilitates the B2B sales process for Outpost Club's 21 houses across New York, New Jersey, and San Francisco. They have about 300 beds total between their portfolio. He also serves as the HR manager, overseeing the recruitment, selection, and onboarding of Outpost Club staff. And before coronavirus, Jacob completed a year-long tour of co-living spaces around Europe, Central Asia, the Middle East, and North Africa with his girlfriend. So we definitely dive into that. Jacob is very well versed in co-living, as you're going to see from this broad conversation. And I am proud to say that I've served alongside of him on a board of directors for the Co-Living Hub for a couple years now. Just such an awesome individual overall. Very knowledgeable. Excited that we brought him back on. We put in the show notes the episode from like a couple years ago, and his is kind of unique because he took his phone and he gave us a tour of one of their properties in real time back then. So definitely check out that episode if you haven't. Lastly, we've also had one of the co-founders on, Sergey. He came on about a year ago to talk about Outpost Club. That link is in the show notes also, so you guys will have fun catching up. Let's go ahead and launch right into the episode. Okay, everybody, we brought on Jacob Shapiro with Outpost Club, and also a very big advocate for co-living, very knowledgeable in this space. So I'm super excited. We sit on the same board at Co-Living Hub and have for a couple years. We'll put it in the show notes, but last time, Jacob, you came on back in on June 27th, 2018. It's been over 2 years. So welcome back to the Coliving Code Show.
Thanks for having me, Christine.
And we will have a broad discussion. I've kind of broken it down into categories so we don't get lost and confuse people. I definitely want to start with the success you guys have had at Outpost Club. I know when you joined 3 years ago over there in New York, you guys had 2 houses and like 21 members. Now you guys have 21 locations and 300 members. You guys are in New York and San Francisco now. So yeah, just kind of catch us up, especially on the expansion, across the country.
Yeah. So since we last spoke, I think we had around 5 or 6 houses, around 70 members. When I started, like you mentioned, we had 21 members and 2 houses. But yeah, it's been a pretty crazy ride. We definitely expanded, pretty quickly. I think that's due to the way we're structured, and yeah, it's been a great ride. So. Like you mentioned, we have New York locations, both in Brooklyn and Manhattan, and then also Jersey City as well. And then lastly, we have a one location in San Francisco.
Nice. And then I know we brought the founder, Sergey, on. That was exactly a year ago. We'll have that in the show notes too. That was August 2019. I know Bedley, 600 beds, unfortunately went out of business back then a year ago, and you guys grabbed some of those up. And I think you guys have done, and I don't know if you could say which companies, I think you guys have done that a few times since then, right? So
Sure.
Some either downsize or go out of business completely, and you guys pick up the leases. Is that correct?
That is true. And that is the cat that I was talking about that we'd have on the air.
Yay!
So
the
yeah,
cat came out,
yeah,
yes.
she definitely will not stop. But yeah, to answer your question, yeah. So we, when Bedley was going out of business, like you mentioned, they looked to transition some of their leases to other properties or other companies rather. We took on some of their properties here in New York, mostly in Jersey City and Manhattan, though I think 1 or 2 in Brooklyn as well. And yeah, also I think you may have spoken with the owners of Place Me. They took over their lease obligations in Boston. And so, yeah, that was one of a couple companies that has taken place with. I think others were Hack and Sleep in San Francisco. That was our entree into San Francisco, though we don't operate those properties anymore. And then Stoop had a couple properties in Brooklyn that we have since managed since then. So yeah, it's obviously unfortunate that those companies went out of business, but it was good that there were other companies that, like us and Place Me, that could step into that place and kind of help out when needed. So yeah.
And then that's a perfect segue into the differences again. And again, I know you guys have played in each arena where it's like master lease, management agreement, profit sharing. So kind of love to kind of elaborate on that, especially now when everybody's trying to switch off of the master lease model.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we basically are doing just that. Like anything that we're signing now is mostly management agreements, which is pretty much in line with the majority of the industry right now. Obviously, coronavirus led to both a decent number of cancellations and also stopped our pipeline of new members, co-living members coming to stay with us. And so, yeah, we the lease agreement kind of leaves the exposed on that side. And so, yeah, I mean, since coronavirus hit, we've gotten rid of some houses and we added some new houses. Fortunately for members for houses that they were at, we had really good options for where they could move to, or they could stay with the landlord that they were with. So yeah, that's kind of been where we're at. But you're right. We're mostly just signing these management agreements now to kind of reduce risk. But it's also nice to have a mix. I think there's this understanding that the lease agreement model is dead. And I don't really think that. I think for our best performing properties, it's a no-brainer that you would still want to have that. It's a matter of making sure that the best performing properties are the ones that you have lease agreements with, and the management agreements are ones that you're either looking to build to that level, or maybe a riskier project for the co-living company themselves.
And give us a bigger, broad picture of how these 21 buildings are situated. So is it like a brownstone with how many people on average in one? between those 21 buildings, how many different landlords do you guys have?
Sure. Yeah. So it's pretty broad. Most houses, and then let's talk about ideally, the type of house that we're looking for in the majority of our locations are full apartment buildings, so multi-unit apartment buildings where we have all the units, and usually they have like a common area, usually in the basement, that is like a full common area for most of our members. So there's common areas within the units, but also a general common area that everyone can have as well. So that's the ideal. We probably have half, maybe a little more than half of our units, or our locations rather, fit that profile. And then the other half are kind of spread, with some units that we took over from other companies. They were some were like individual units in houses, or multiple individual units within larger buildings. We have one property where we have like one whole floor of a 6-floor building. So that's one way, and we have additional units in that building as well. So it's really a mix. In terms of the number of total landlords we work with, I don't know the exact numbers, but we definitely do like to work with the same people on multiple buildings. It's just it makes so much more sense to continue to work with them. Getting the ability to get involved in the design process as early on as you can really only happen when you have a relationship with someone previous to their renovation of a new building, right? So we have a couple locations that were the second and third locations we had with the same landlord, and it was really only at that point we could start deciding, okay, this is where we want the walls to go, right? This should be the mix of private bathroom to shared bathroom ratios that we could see that people are preferring from other locations. And yeah, if I was a landlord and I'm renovating a new house and I've never worked with this company before, I would never let them decide where these things go. But having built a trusted relationship with people, I think that's where you start to get more permissive.
Yeah. And a trusted brand. Because which year did you guys start?
2016. So
nice.
So in that, really the year of late 2015 and most of 2016, we're definitely still very small, like 1 or 2 locations for the full year, and opened our third location early 2017, which is when I started. So when I started, we had 2 houses, and then like 3 days later, we were opening our third house. So yeah.
Nice. And then, so I'm guessing, and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, is that, I think the better negotiation power was with those that had entire buildings, because the last thing the landlord wanted during this crisis is you guys to like bail out, right? So was your guys' negotiation power stronger with those landlords? Like, hey, look, we've got to switch this to a management agreement. Like this master lease isn't working, or if you guys got a break on the rent, like how did that work out?
Yeah, I think it's a little. It's simplistic to say like it's just the bigger the building or the more units we had, the more negotiating power we had, because there's a lot of aspects to the negotiation. Not that I'm personally a part of this, to be completely honest, that are other than the size of the units, right? Maybe we're also having a tough time filling it as well, right? So to them, having us as the could be hard too. And there's a lot of different directions you can go. Maybe we return a couple of the units back to the landlord, so that they have the ability to try to fill them. There's other ways to go about it to kind of fill that void.
And then again, you guys were in the like hardest hit cities. And I know that, we're in August right now. I know San Francisco, New York are still struggling.
Mm-hmm.
Some people kind of fled the city until things settled down. How did you guys handle coronavirus, like from day one within your communities?
Yeah. So I mean, obviously the first thing that happened was a lot of cancellations, right? A lot of people saying, if I don't go home right now, I don't know when I will be able to go home. And so that was really hard. So that was obviously the first thing we started to see. Our customer service department was overwhelmed with, processing this type of stuff. And then also from there it was, well, who is coming to New York? It's, we still are a business. We still have to figure out who's coming here. And we realized the one group of people who was coming to New York during this period of time was nurses. And so, we were going to face a large vacancy anyway. It felt like we were just going through the motions, trying to get people to come. And obviously, no one was really coming to New York City, which is totally fine, totally understandable. We said, all right, at least we could do something for the people that are coming here and need to find quick and convenient housing for them. So we set aside a bunch of units for nurses during that period of time. And since right now there's not a lot of nurses coming anymore, but during that time when they were all flocking to New York City, we probably housed over 50, I think it was either between 50 and 60 total nurses during that period of time. So, obviously it was a hard time, but at least we were able to do something good during that period of time.
And then did you guys put them in their own units, obviously, because they were coming in close contact with COVID patients?
Exactly. So
Okay.
The main concern was for our own members, right? If we're going to do this, how can we keep our own members safe? And so making self-contained units was a priority for that.
And then how about, so the current residents, was it like hand sanitizer, extra cleanings, can't have guests over, can't go outside? Like how did you guys implement all that real quickly, like out the gate? And I've talked to other operators, everybody's kind of done different things.
Sure. And I definitely listened to some of the other podcasts where it's interesting to see how guests responded. From our perspective, it seemed as if the leading voice within the houses were the people who wanted to reduce as much exposure within the house to anyone who didn't need to enter the house in the first place, right? So our cleaning staff stopped entering the houses. We would clean up to the front doors of the apartments and then leave cleaning supplies at the door. We felt like while they're paying for the cleaning services, we still want to provide them with those things. So having the cleaning supplies is our way of being able to do that. So that was basically our strategy for cleaning. And then, of course, if there was anything specific, like we need to have this place clean and we have the agreement of everyone in the house, then definitely capable of entering upon their consent. Same with management, or rather maintenance requests. Anything that was a non-emergency maintenance request was deferred for a while. And then unless otherwise, with the agreement of everyone in the house. And yeah, so that's basically what it was like for that period of time. Now cleanings have resumed. It feels like things are going back to normal. Obviously things are not back to normal. I think New York has done a good job of mitigating the spread. We're definitely through the worst of it. I mean, I can't say maybe it will come back, but at least right now, it feels like things are starting to progress back to normal. And that's definitely from the demand perspective showing as well.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I'm glad you got us all caught up on Outpost Club. I know you've been there a while and you're always, it's nice to see, and again, the larger properties here in the States,
Mm-hmm.
How they're handling things. Are you guys still growing a little bit, you think, adding more beds?
Yeah.
Right now?
We opened our most recent property at the beginning of either the middle of July or the beginning of August. I'm not sure which one, but we opened our Lafayette House. You can find it on our website. And it's one of our biggest properties too. I don't know the total number of beds, but it's kind of like the ideal space. Like I was talking about before, they have, I would say, around 40 beds total, with the common area in the basement as well. And so, yeah, it's a cool property, good location, and we're excited about it.
Have you guys done any ground up yet?
We have not. No.
Okay. Are you guys looking at doing that?
No, we don't. I mean, I think in the future, obviously, that would be a great way to go about it. I think right now, we get at points the ability to influence the design process, and that's good enough for now. I think at some point in the future, yes, we would obviously want to do that, but for now, we're happy with being able to have an impact in the way that it would be doing a ground up development.
And you guys don't own a single building, right?
We do not know.
Okay, cool. And then that leads, I know we were chatting earlier, you guys have an amazing house leader program. You guys need good applicants. I know we've paired up people for jobs already. We've paired investors with operators on the show, which is amazing. I love those stories. So anybody else, tell me if you guys have met through the show or gotten a job through the show. And these are I know a lot of operators listen to this show and podcast. Maybe you guys are downsizing. Maybe you guys had to unfortunately let go of some amazing, community managers. So I would love for you to kind of elaborate on what your guys' house leader program entails. What areas would they need to move to or live in?
Yeah. So the house leader program, when I started, I was the community manager and house leader, right? I'd run from house to house and do all the different move-ins, move-outs, room flips, doing the events, and knowing all the members, right? That was kind of my job at the beginning. Then we had around 4 or 5 houses. It was too much for just one person to do. And so we started to have house leaders who lived in the house. We would promote people within the house to be house leader in exchange for a rent reduction. So that was the initial house leader program that we had. And we found that while we did have very many good house leaders from that model, where it was just a small rent reduction for someone who was already living in the house, ultimately they didn't come to New York City to be a house leader, right? They came for some other reason and they've decided to be a house leader. So a lot of the time was good. A lot of the time people put it on the back burner. So we tried to rethink it again and how can we make this work? And so, we looked really to the hostel world. In hostels, it's a very common thing for travelers to have subsidized stay in exchange for a certain number of hours per week, and that's what we do. And so, basically, in exchange for around 20 volunteer hours a week, you can get a shared room at a house of our choice. So sometimes people are moved around the city. A lot of the time they're entirely stationary. The position we're currently looking for, fortunately, the person would get a private room. So that would be very nice. And it's for that new house I was talking about, the Lafayette House. And so, yeah, that's kind of the position is move-ins, move-outs, point of contact at the house. They would be onboarded by yours truly, and then would be supervised by our community manager. And it's really good. Right now, like I mentioned, we source from a lot of the hostel world generally, a lot of people who are doing reception work and things like that in the hostel world. But also, it would work really well for a digital nomad. At the moment, obviously, digital nomads are limited to travel to the U.S. and New York specifically. So if there are any American digital nomads, that would be in an ideal situation where you could work from home and then also, have this ability to stay in New York, fully subsidized, and explore the city.
And you are actually in Vermont, but didn't you move up to Vermont before COVID?
Yeah. So before, we were really lucky. So my partner and I, we went on a tour of co-living spaces for a little under a year in Europe, Central Asia, the Middle East, and in North Africa. And so after coming back, we came back on January 15th. And we saw family for a little while. So that probably brought us to mid-February and settled down in Burlington on February 23rd. So if you think about when coronavirus really started to shut things down, it was early March. We got here and then things shut down. It was that close. And so we were incredibly fortunate in terms of timing. Obviously, we'd rather none of this have happened in the first place. But in terms of timing, we had just settled down in Burlington, and so things are cool here. Things feel like they're opening back up. Vermont as a whole state, which has 600,000 people, reports around 5 to 10 cases a day. So it's very low for the size of the population. And things are starting to come back to normal here.
Nice. Yeah, you guys timed that perfectly. And yeah, we're going to talk about the tour you guys did, the co-living tour, which was, that was so much fun kind of seeing your journey. Every time we talked to you, you're in a different city, which is cool. And then last point I'll make on Outpost Club. And again, for those that didn't watch the older episode we've done over 2 years ago, Jacob was the only one that took his cell phone and gave us like a real-time tour of like one of the locations, which that was the only time we've ever done that in the show, which was really cool. So you guys can kind of check out one of their locations over there. Let's jump over to the tour. I don't know if you have all the cities memorized off the top of your head. If you do, great. Where you went, all of that.
I've listed it a lot of times, so I'm pretty sure I know it. So, we started the tour with the Co-Living Hub conference, which Christina and I met up in that was April 2019. Wow. And so we started there. So we were in Las Palmas, and we got to see Restation among other locations. And so we spent one night there, but got to see the co-working space pretty much for the week that we were there. And then we really started our longer stays at other co-living spaces. So from there, we went to Coconut, and we spent a month and a half at Coconut doing the volunteer program there, which also I obviously would rather you come and stay at our volunteer program, but an amazing volunteer program at Coconut, which you can also find online if you're interested. And so that's in Germany, outside of Berlin. And then from there, we went to Mokran House for about a month. And then from there, we went to Swiss Escape for a month. And then from there, we went to Armenia, where we went to a co-living space that has since closed called Cilicia Living. They still are running some things, but not from the same location. And then we spent a little time in Georgia, but not at a co-living space. We did go to a co-working space while we were there. That was pretty cool, called Terminal. And then from there, we went to kind of a hostel co-living mix in Tel Aviv called Overstay Jaffa, and we were there for 2 months. And then finally, I think it was our last stop. Yeah, our last stop was in Morocco at Sundesk. We made one last stop in Germany, back at Coconut, just to finish it off, and then we came back to the US. But yeah, so we got to see kind of all the I don't know, in our mind, those were the premier digital nomad co-living spaces that you could find. I think the one that we didn't get to go to, but would have totally loved to go to, is Sundesk, and then that would have really rounded out the trip. But yeah.
And Mokran House is the one in very rural area, right? What city? Where is it near again? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, it's near. I'm going to forget the name of the nearby city, but Mokran House is in the town of Mokran, and then it was about 2.5 hour drive from Belgrade, so it's pretty far out there. You fly into Belgrade, and then you take a bus or a taxi up to Mokran House. So yeah, that was pretty far out there, and same with Coconut. Those two, I would say, are the most. They give me the most hope in co-living because they are so far out of the way, and yet they are doing such great things, and people really are fanatical about them. They really do like them, both the local, community in which they operate, as well as returning guests. So they totally have, returning guests. I think that would probably actually be the same said for Sundesk as well. Sundesk really has a huge returning guest community. Every surf season, there's people back there. Yeah.
I know I'm regretting not going to Mokran House because I was in Serbia a couple of years ago. I love Serbia. For anybody listening, it was like an underrated place to go, and I loved the food was amazing. Like the people were great, so highly recommend that visiting there. So that's awesome. So shout out to all those operators you mentioned. Yeah, they have stellar reputations. I know your partner in crime, Taylor. I know you guys kind of went on this amazing adventure, in essence, to eventually kind of open up your own version of co-living there in Vermont, correct?
Yeah. I will not lie. We are very early in the process. We're not even sure exactly how we want to structure it. But I think ultimately the goal would be to open a space here, either in Burlington or the surrounding towns. Burlington's kind of the largest population center in Vermont, so I think that would make the most sense. But we're also interested in the county is called Chittenden County, kind of this area as well. We think co-living generally would do great here. I think it fits into what the city is looking to do from an affordable housing perspective. in terms of a community engagement perspective. And yeah, we see ourselves here in the long term. So we want to do something here in the long term.
And then what were your biggest, and again, I know you've been deep in co-living for a while now. And so I'm curious to know, what were some surprising things or some big takeaways when you were jumping around, seeing all these co-living operators?
Some big takeaways. I would say, I think I kind of already mentioned one aspect of it, is that don't be too worried about like the location in which you're opening it being non-desirable, right? Like if you see that there's some opportunity here, then you should do it. Like I mentioned, Coconut. I mean, the surrounding town is 100 people. There's no supermarket in the town. You have to go to one town over to, they have all the food on site because there is nowhere to go get food outside. And that's amazing because it means everyone sits and eats together for every meal. And they really, their ability to build that community is just so much higher. So I'd say that's one aspect. I think appreciating the work of everyone on your team, both seeing this at Outpost Club and from abroad, is essential to the success of your space. I don't, I kind of operate as the HR manager for Outpost, and having a happy team is paramount to our operations working well, and for our customers to be happy too. So I'd say that's really a big aspect of it. And I think one thing at the time when we were out there, we were going to all these digital nomad places. I was like, that's great. I think it's cool. But I think generally the digital nomad, trying to go for the digital nomad market is good for a small space, right? If you're a small space, that's when it makes sense. And lo and behold, coronavirus comes around, everyone becomes a remote worker. And now everyone is somewhat considering, I really don't want to go back to the office. And I really don't think this. And I think the actual market size for, all of the spaces that I mentioned, it's sad that many of them have had to close during the time of coronavirus. But the market that they'll have once it comes back is unfathomably larger overnight. I mean, it's really amazing. So, yeah.
No, and you're exactly, and I'm consulting with a couple big operators that they're literally raising money right now, about to break ground on brand new projects, and they're raising with no problem, because I think everybody sees that future of, now it's like, oh my gosh, that's, people can work remote, people can move around. So that's going to be the future of living. And they see that even during coronavirus, which is great. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, before coronavirus, the BC time, your desire to live in a really nice place could be mitigated by the fact that you might actually not spend a lot of time at home, right? So, if I live in Burlington, we chose our location merely based off location. We live in a decent apartment, but we didn't anticipate to spend every waking moment in our apartment, right, from February to like March, or February to April. And I think everyone's kind of going through that at the same time. They're like, my apartment is a lot smaller than I really thought it was if I have to spend all my time in it, right? And so when you have that change in your consumer preferences change, your change in perspective on the place in which you live, one of the things that you're going to consider is, wow, I've really self-isolated myself with no one else. For coronavirus, that's it's a good aspect. But after coronavirus, maybe I would want to live with others, and so I think that will really be another change that comes, which should be only to the benefit of co-living.
Definitely. And then I know I've talked about the weekly co-living forum we do every Wednesday. So hopefully people can join us. It's always an amazing group of people from around the world talking about co-living, how they're dealing with coronavirus. But I swear we're probably going to keep it going post coronavirus. So yesterday you were there, and somebody asked such a great question. He's out of Africa, and he's like, "You guys, do you think co-living? Let's fast forward. We know it'll be around in 10 years, but what about 20, 30?" It was such a great question posed. I mean, we've talked about on the show before, we think there's going to be co-living on Mars. So, I was saying, hey, we were in caves as groups for protection, right? And so then we evolved to this nuclear family, which I was doing more research on before I jumped on here, because I'm like, when did that even start? That was back to the early 13th century is what it said, back in England, where then the children would move out and establish their own households. So that kind of started that trend. And then Jacob, and I'd love for you to elaborate. It's just like how things move, how things shift and change and evolve. You were saying, now there's these single family homes, and part of me thinks it's sales and marketing, because when you have a single family home, which is a couple people in it, you have to buy appliances, you have to buy all this stuff, furniture, versus, how do you kind of condense that to where it makes more sense, more people sharing more things. And then, so I would love for you to continue on. You made such great points yesterday. I loved it.
Yeah. I think we were talking about the fact that, you could definitely look back really, really far and see how this could be cyclical. But you don't even have to look back too far to see, versions of living together just making sense, particularly in large cities. So the major piece would be the boarding house, right, which was a staple, really, of many large cities when large groups of people were looking to move to large cities during the Industrial Revolution, and really afterwards, even up until like post World War II, same thing as well. Large flocking to cities, and then I think the other aspect which we're talking, which is that one thing that capitalism does is it splits things into very small pieces. It's called the atomization of the economy, right? And so it makes like any aspect of your life that could have been sufficed by, that could have been satisfied really by your nuclear family starts to get picked apart because you could pay for it, right? And there was a market to, instead of you raising your children, maybe I just hire a nanny to work to have my children, right? To hire my children, to look after my children, and so all those little things have started to happen, and it meant we didn't need to live as close to one another as we used to, and we thought that was a good thing, right? There are safety benefits to living with just your nuclear family. There's a lot of different things that you have a larger level of privacy. You're less reliant on others generally, based on if you have money within a capitalist system, right? But then that led to a lot of side effects that it seems like we're coming back around on saying, I actually don't like the side effects that came with the atomization of the economy, particularly loneliness. And like you mentioned, the single family home, while I grew up in one and love, where I grew up and everything, ultimately it is a fashion of living that will definitely persist on and will make sense for a group of people, but is making sense for less and less groups of people as time goes on. You could still have a single family home or have that unit, but who actually lives in it can be a co-living space, or it doesn't need to be just the single family that lives there. And I think that this will take place. I mean, I know my partner and I, Taylor, eventually we would like to have kids and we would like to have a family, right? And I think to envision a time where we will just want to live in this house and have neighbors, but not too close neighbors. Maybe know your neighbors. Not really. I don't really look forward to that. I look forward to a time when, maybe it's in Burlington, maybe it's somewhere else, that we have the ability to live in semi-close proximity while maintaining our own privacy with our neighbors. And I think co-living and co-housing really facilitates that. And it's kind of a return to this type of living, the benefits of a type of living from a while ago.
And imagine all the resources you can, and just same in our home, like you pool, you've got 6 people, so you can have a gym in the garage and you can have like all these really cool resources that you're all sharing. or like, you live in a co-housing community and you guys maybe have a rec center and a swimming pool, and everybody has access to that.
I think
Versus,
yeah.
single family home with its own swimming pool and a couple cars. And
Yeah. I think it's so funny when, I don't know if you've ever been in a studio apartment and seen a full-size dishwasher. I don't understand why one or maybe two people would need a full-size dishwasher in their apartment, and they're paying for it, through their rent or however they are, right? That's the atomization that's leading to people paying for things that they could potentially collaborate on. I think the sharing economy was very easy to facilitate for things like taxis and Airbnbs and things like that, unlocking underused or unused space, or in the case of Uber, cars, right? But it'll be harder to do that with living together. But I think it'll be so much more worth it for every person that actually does engage in it. Like I said, three or four, five, six people can share a dishwasher. It just makes more common sense than yeah.
Well, six starts pushing it, to be honest.
Yeah, that's true. That's fair. That's fair.
In our
But
home,
if you get an industrial dishwasher and you use it, yeah, there you go.
yeah, we're trying to get the landlord to replace ours because it's not
Yeah.
cutting it anymore. And
Sure.
in a perfect world, we'd have two, because ours is
Sure.
running every single day, if not
Yeah.
sometimes twice a day.
Sure. Yeah.
And we've already talked about, okay, Jacob, we got to talk about this again, because maybe we've talked about in the show when you were on, or I know we have before, is the dishes. Like, isn't that even in your guys' community? Like, what are you guys, we post this sign, saying everybody's going to be more productive if the sink is empty, if the dishes are put away. And that kind of works. I think we've been a lot better about it. But how about, do you guys have any tips, tricks, hacks? You guys got a lot more people living in some of the homes.
Yeah, I think when I was abroad, one of the things that you were saying, like, what did you learn from abroad? I took pictures of everyone's version of the sign that was in relation to the dishes. So what did I do? The one that I liked the best it was a picture of a dish that had legs and arms, and it was standing under a shower, and it was washing itself, and it said, "Unfortunately, our dishes don't wash themselves." And so I like that one a lot. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's one tactic you could take is comedy within shared requirements. So, I think that was a really good one that I liked a lot. And yeah, so it ebbs and flows. Honestly, there are times where there are apartments that are really, groups of people in our co-living spaces that are in one unit that are really, really concerned with their own cleanliness and the organization and making sure everyone feels comfortable and happy. And then there are other apartments where you have to rely on the lease, right? And then one person is like, hey, I have a higher standard of cleanliness, and the person has maybe a lower standard of cleanliness, and making sure those meet because we have expectations set in the lease. And so it's, this is the perennial conversation for every co-living space, right? It's a never ending story, right? It is different places deal with it in different ways. I've heard other co-living spaces that where they have kitchenettes plus large kitchens, where the large kitchen, they've just given up, right? And they just, their on-site staff does the dishes every week, or every day rather. If you go to I have a couple friends who work in large, companies in New York City where they have the same thing. The kitchen, the communal kitchen stocked with, chips and things like that. But they also have a lot of plates and cups. Most people aren't using plates at the office, but cups, people go and get, water throughout the day. Right. And some people don't use the same cup all the time, and they do this. By the end of the day, the sink is overflowing with cups. And it's just the nature of what the system that they set up there. Everyone knows I can put my cup here, and tomorrow this sink will be empty. And so you've set up the system where, this problem is only going to get worse, And so if you two things you can do, you can rely on the expectations previously set, and then when things go wrong, intervening. So yeah.
No, we haven't done this one in a while. We'd always have like one or two housemates that would like take a picture of the sink. This hasn't happened lately, overflowing, and just be like, "Hey, team," and not in a passive aggressive way, just a real friendly, "Hey, team, let's just support each other and make sure we're putting our dishes away." Like just to kind of bring it to everybody's attention and like a group text. It's been a while since I've seen one of those.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is
We have our house
every.
leaders do that too. Yeah.
Okay,
If
cool.
they see it, if they see anything kind of egregious, they'll post and then send it to the group. Say, hey
They say
guys.
it in like a nice way.
Yeah, yeah. Well, sometimes they'll like do the dishes. They'll take a picture, do the dishes, and then send it, and then but send it. You know what I mean? Like I got to fix the problem in the meantime, but you also have to acknowledge the problem existed, right? Both things, you know. So anyway, yeah, they shouldn't be doing dishes. We really we put it in the system, you know, in our thing. Like, look, you shouldn't have to do dishes. This is the people's responsibility, but every once in a while it will occur. Are you okay with that? And they're like, yeah, usually I'm okay with that. So
Cool.
unless
Yeah,
it's not
and
egregious.
yeah. And then we have somebody every morning, Monday through Friday, we have somebody coming in anyways. And so they're doing it first thing in the morning, and then we're maintaining it through the day, and we're running the dishwasher at night. And I mean, six people home all the time, eating every single meal from home. I was a little concerned at first when Corona 5 months ago, but no, I think we all were in agreement. We're all home. Like, put your dishes away. Like, please, it will just be insane. So yeah, I think people listening to this are probably laughing, operators, because it's and people that are co-living right now, because
Funny,
I've
yeah.
never heard it being handled perfectly.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I didn't really think about it that way, specifically for your space. Is like you had one dishwasher, which sufficed maybe during the time that you before coronavirus, right? But then because of coronavirus, everyone's eating at home for basically every meal, and that increased the usage of the dishwasher. That's a good point. Didn't think about it that way.
Yep, fun times, fun times. That's okay. We're surviving, right?
Yeah, yeah,
First world problems. At least we have a dishwasher.
yeah, right.
And so, okay, so now, like talking about again the evolution of co-living. This is another thing I get asked a lot. You know, hey Christine, are people, especially now? I was getting asked this before coronavirus, and now especially. Hey, do you see people now flocking out of cities and going to these rural areas, co-living in rural areas? You know, I would say, you know, Wi-Fi is getting a lot better around the world, which is amazing in all areas. So I think that was like a hindrance before, like, oh, the Wi-Fi is not going to be as good for out of the city. But however, and again, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, is just like single professionals they still want to live in the city. They still want to have the nightlife, the social aspects. So I don't, you know, all the stats still show, you know, people flocking to cities. What do you think on that?
Yeah, I think the last time people, at least in the US, were leaving a major city was 9/11. And that definitely affected New York City 100% from a real estate perspective, from a community perspective, safety. Everyone, you know, I'm sure you can imagine it was, you know, a nightmare. I was only 6, 7 at the time, so I don't particularly remember. But you know, that was the last time a major event occurred that caused people to leave en masse from the city. And look at New York City now. I mean, we're 20 years later, so it's a large period of time. But the demand to live in New York City only increased, you know, since then. Um, Obviously, this is a different crisis that has different effects. And it was not a single event; it is over a longer term. But uh, I I think two things will happen. I think this desire to be in cities will persist as usual. It's going to dip now, and I do imagine that it'll come back. There will be different requirements, different consumer preferences, but people will still want to be here. I mean, it is still the center of opportunities. You know, it's where the majority of jobs are, and though there will be a lot of remote work that has started because of this, it'll still you know, be a place to congregate. I don't think there's any way of replacing the allure of going to big cities. On the other side, like I mentioned, there's going to be a lot of new remote workers that are going to say, I've been running the rat race in this city for a long time. I can continue to do my job and go explore like I've always said that I wanted to do. And so I would be interested to see how many people are now watching YouTube videos of digital nomads. The whole digital nomad movement has a lot of influencers and things like that, people going to new cities and checking out co-working spaces and things like that. And so I have to imagine, I'm just guessing here, the people who are trying to figure out what's next, that's got to be what they're looking at. And that's, I'm sure, heavily influencing them. There's a whole new group of people who are getting on the bandwagon of, live with a certain level of freedom that digital nomads present online. So I think that will definitely influence people, and there's going to be a group of people that want to do that. And so, there's going to be both things. Both are going to rise, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, Bali's just going to get an influx of people
oh my
again.
God, I can't imagine.
Chiang Mai, Thailand, and Bali, like people are just going to go flood those two cities after watching Instagram and all this. Like, and you're right, yeah. I mean, and I love those cities myself. But if you could work anywhere in the world, maybe you're making a U.S. salary, you're making that San Francisco salary. You go jump over there, and you could just live like a king or a queen.
Yeah. And conversely, right? Like if you had to work from San Francisco for a long time and you had to be in the office there, and now you're a remote worker and you're like, well, I've always wanted to live in New York. Like same thing. It just because they're moving doesn't mean they're moving away always from a large city. It just might be more temporary stays, like more short stays. That is to say, the average person who is renting yearly might move to being the average person renting monthly.
And then are there any, so just a couple of questions. First off, I'll name mine first that I've kind of seen a lot of activity in. Some cities around the world that you're like, whoa, a lot of co-living's happening already all at once. Los Angeles, it was almost like overnight. There's like 30, 40 co-living operators in it, which is great. It's an amazing city. Of course, I'm biased. And then Berlin, I see a ton of ground up. People that are about to open, not open yet, 280 units, 400 plus. And then I see South Africa, so Cape Town. So like what are some, Singapore has a lot of co-living. What are some cities off the top of your head that you're just seeing a lot of activity, either currently or future pipeline?
Yeah, I'd say there's always been this disconnect between Asian co-living and American co-living, where there seems to be this boom that's occurring in China and India and really Southeast Asia generally, that was separate from what was going on in kind of Western co-living spaces. I'm not really sure why that exists, but I would point out one major place that I saw maybe just more recently because of watching your last podcast and video with Connor, was Malaysia has a surprising number of co-living spaces for its size. I guess it's a pretty large country, population-wise at least. But still, they have a decent number of co-living spaces that are popping up there. I see a large rise in a lot of normal property developers creating co-living projects, right? I think that's or at least backing co-living projects. So they are the biggest ones I feel like have that are not branded. The biggest ones that are not branded, I think, are coming from large institutional investors that are seeing this trend, and maybe we can do something a little more risky, but that can revert to a normal apartment if this doesn't work out, right? So there's a lot of co-livings that there's a lot of co-living that is branded, right? Large ones like Quarters and Ollie and things like that. And then there's also a lot of property developers that were just normally in large cities that are building co-living spaces and not really branding them as co-living spaces, just in the same way they branded their other buildings. So I see a lot of that as well. I don't know, I can't specifically say where, but I'm just looking online, I've seen a lot of that.
Got it. No, that makes sense. And then what are some of your favorite, whether you toured them or not, what are some favorite brands, like co-living brands globally that you really like what they're doing?
So I would say Outsite's locations are pretty beautiful. I think they do a great job of having disaggregated spaces, small individual unit spaces, but keeping the community aspect of it and keeping branding across locations. So I think they did a really good job there. And I would say I've seen Ollie's locations. I've seen Commons locations, both beautiful. I think they're both great spaces. Ollie's location was amazing. I mean, their gym was massive, and yeah, just beautiful space. They have a rooftop area in their Long Island City location that it's just like unparalleled. So yeah, I think those are basically what I've seen. Trying to think of what else I've seen. We have a location here in Burlington that's not really a co-living space, but may eventually become a co-living space. That I think they did a good job of. They took this is just a normal apartment building, but eventually part of the project will be a co-living potentially. That is they took an orphanage that was this huge old, I don't know if it's Victorian, but huge old brick building, this beautiful building, and turned it into multiple units that I'm sure took a lot of time and energy to make beautiful. So yeah.
Cool. And then are there any, and again, don't name names on this one. Are there any things that you see that some co-living brands are doing, that you have concerns about or that you're like, okay, maybe that's not the best thing to do or a way to go about things anywhere?
Remote check-ins, I would say is the one that I'm not a big fan of. Outpost Club has done remote check-ins at times when we really can't get someone there, but it is an absolute last ditch thing. You don't, it's because we really couldn't get anyone to be there on time, and we will always meet the person in person afterwards. We've spoken about this a million times. The first impression is one of the most important things when it comes to your co-living space, and not having a person meet you at the door is part of that first impression. And so when you get in and there's directions on your phone and you got to go there and then you got to go here and you're confused, and that is what someone will remember, is the nervous experience that they had when they got there, instead of someone being like, "Hi, I'm Jacob. I'm going to show you your room. Everything's going to be great. I'm going to answer all your questions," right? You immediately become calm when there's someone who seems like they know what they're doing, right? I'd say remote check-ins is probably the one thing that I would stray away from.
Oh, Jacob, I love that one. Nobody's given that advice yet. And I didn't even think about that. Yeah, I mean, you guys, everybody listening, watching, it's like awkward. I mean, okay, Airbnb is one thing, right? You're right. And that's hard enough. Like directions, how do I get the key? It's awkward when I walk in, who's in there, especially if it's a shared Airbnb. But I mean, imagine yourself in their position. This is your new home. Yeah. Where's your bedroom? How am I opening cabinets that aren't even supposed to be opened? And then there's residents already there. It's awkward, especially if you're an introverted person, you're like, "Hi, I'm your new roommate." Exactly. So I think that liaison, that community manager, welcoming them, showing them around, introducing them to people, is super special and important with the customer service aspect. That's something right now I'm preaching, again, 100% occupancy. People kind of, I think they slacked a little bit on the customer service aspects across the board. Light bulb is out, the operator's like, "Oh, we'll get to it whenever." And, and that's reflected in some online reviews that I've been reading, from some of the larger operators. And everybody could do this. You could go on, Google reviews, Yelp, search the big operators, see what people are saying, what upsets them. Sometimes you'd be surprised it's something really minor. And then they're like, "Yeah, but they have these amazing events, that I love." So you can tell they love events, but then they get upset if requests aren't responded to. Mm-hmm. So again, with occupancies dropping, I think operators are going to have to step up their customer service game across the board.
Yeah, people get to shop right now, right? This is kind of part of it, is that when there's a bunch of availability, they can sign up for 1 month with Outpost, and then if they like it, they stay. If they don't, they go somewhere else, and or they stay and then they think there's a better opportunity somewhere else, and they go somewhere else, and it's not very good or not as good as where they started, right? That can happen. I think it happens. When I was traveling abroad, you stay at one Airbnb and say, if it works out, we'll stay. If it doesn't, we go somewhere else, right? It doesn't matter like what the industry is. People, if there's opportunity to be in the driver's seat, they're gonna take that opportunity, right? So yeah.
Have you guys had that? Have you guys had people move and then move back?
Yes, absolutely. People who have had, will stay with us for a month and then maybe find an Airbnb for a month, and the Airbnb is just like a nightmare Airbnb that they're staying in. That they were like, oh, maybe I could just like save a couple $100 per month. And it just was not worth that $100 to them in comparison to the service we were providing. Absolutely. I actually texted someone this morning who was like, who chose someone else. We were trying to have them stay with us. They decided to go with a different one, and I don't think it was a co-living, but they stayed somewhere else. And she texted me this morning saying, "Hey, it's really not going good here. I was wondering if you have any other availability in Jersey City. Like, I would love to hear it." So, yeah.
They will remain nameless, whichever competitor that was.
Oh, no. It wasn't a competitor. It was that she went and chose either an Airbnb or just like a normal furnished apartment that wasn't branded. So, yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
And then move back. No, that's good. Okay. So let me see if there's any other questions I have. Let's see. I think that's it. I knew we blocked extra time because I'm like, I know it's going to be probably an hour talking to Jacob.
Sure,
We've been so much fun, sitting on the same board alongside of you. Like, I even learned tons from you. You have such like a broad view of the macro level of co-living globally, which is rad. You're in it every day. You eat, sleep, breathe it also, which is always fun to have somebody doing that. Is there any other last points, comments, other than the definitely the community? We need to find you a house leader.
That's all I was going to mention. If you want to, if you're interested in the position, feel free to reach out. I'm sure Christine can provide you with my information. Would be really. I'm looking forward to speaking with anyone who's interested in the position. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
And one last quick mention to make sure you register for the Monk Realty Summit 2020. Again, September 1st to September 3rd. Registration link is in the show notes. Thank you so much for checking out today's episode. And if you're looking for more information on co-living, you can check out our published book, The Co-Living Code, on Amazon. And be sure to go to Kindred to check out our online search and discovery platform for co-living around the world. Lastly, a quick thank you again to both of our sponsors. Anyplace makes it easy to book a flexible, furnished accommodation anywhere in the world, whether it's an apartment, co-living space, or extended stay hotel. And also ISL Furnishings. Trust your unit interiors to ISL. They bring light to your vision. And one last quick mention to make sure you register for the Monk Realty Summit 2020. Again, September 1st to September 3rd. Registration link is in the show notes.